In 1970, the emotionally fragile Lula Cora, a single mother who suffered from mental health issues, was exceedingly distressed when she got embroiled in a heated, tempestuous argument with her family, which precipitated her desire to leave the house in Galesburg, Illinois, for good, with the full intention of never ever returning again, even though it meant leaving behind her 15-year-old child. The argument that caused Lula to leave her home is still shrouded in mystery, as some secrets remain clandestinely hidden behind closed doors. But it certainly left her family in no doubt that she would never reappear in their lives again. They were certain that she was gone for good and was unlikely to ever come back. Ostensibly, throughout her children's lives, she had notoriously fleetingly bobbed in and out of their childhoods, rather like the proverbial bee. So let's just say reliability was not one of her strong points. It would appear that Lula Cora had disappeared off the face of the earth, as there were no police leads or tips from the public as to what on earth had happened to the young woman. Needless to say, people shrugged their shoulders in a beleaguered acceptance that answers to her vanishing would never ever be forthcoming. Then a fortuitous event occurred 15 years later that serendipitously brought answers to this enigmatic mystery, when mushroom hunters discovered human remains in a Galesburg brickyard. In those days, regretfully, DNA analysis or bone identification was still premature in its scientific advancement, so facial reconstruction was orchestrated on the bones in order to identify the ambiguous remains of this anonymous body. It was subsequently determined that the bones belonged to Lula Cora, so the family, relieved to finally have closure in their lives, held a memorial service for their beloved Lula. They buried her remains in a local graveyard, where they visited her resting place regularly, placing pretty flowers on her tombstone to honour her memory. They were obliviously unaware that the remains that had been buried there certainly did not belong to Lula Cora, but to a woman called Helen Ruth Alps. Once DNA breakthroughs had transformed body identification analysis, Lula Cora's bones were promptly exhumed for the purposes of DNA analysis. It was found that the bones did not actually belong to her, and after this unexpected revelation, the police dutifully took another angle of investigation in the search for Lula Cora, discovering that an 84-year-old woman living in Florida was in fact the very same woman whom had disappeared in 1970. But she was now living under a new surname, Hood, in another family, where she raised over 14 children of her own. In all likelihood, due to her advancing years, along with her enfeebled memory, she'd simply forgotten about her first daughter, but they once again reconvened in an emotional reunion. So the mystery to this startling case was finally solved, and a woman assumed to be dead resurfaced again. So this leaves one to conclude that the fight Lula Cora had with her family in 1971 was significantly dramatic for her to want to start her life all over again. Lucy Ann Kavak was born in 1935, but her surname changed to Johnson after she married her fiancé Marvin in Blaine, Washington State, and then they moved to Surrey in British Columbia, near Vancouver in Canada, located near 103 Avenue and 145 Street in North Surrey. She gave birth to 2 children, a daughter called Linda and a son called David. Lucy Ann Johnson was reported missing by her husband from their home in Surrey in 1965, so the police assumed that Lucy had been missing over a matter of days, but were very puzzled when neighbours reported that they hadn't seen any sight or sound of the young woman since September 1961, which invariably meant no one had seen her for 4 years. So why was Lucy's husband Marvin reporting her missing so late in the day? It was an enigmatic mystery, to say the least, and to date British Columbia's oldest missing case report. To all intents and purposes, the police became exceedingly suspicious of Marvin. Had he surreptitiously murdered his wife Lucy and buried her in their backyard? He was known for having a hot temper, and given that his wife was missing, it was decided that Marvin's yard would be dug up by the Surrey Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But after a thorough search of the yard, they found no sign of human remains, so the case remained open for many years, with no answers being forthcoming as to what happened to Lucy Ann Johnson. Lucy's Ann's son David sadly passed away when he was a mere teenager, and Marvin got remarried shortly after his wife's disappearance, and it was in the late 1990s he passed away. And then Linda, the only surviving member of the family, was left with this conundrum. What on earth had happened to her mother? Surely someone had some answers to her whereabouts, if indeed she was still alive. And if she was, someone must have some answers. Linda decided to put an advertisement in the Yukon News, close to her mother's birthplace. In the newspaper she described her mother as being 5'5", with dark hair and an olive complexion, and then she put down her mother's name, birthplace and date of birth, as well as her grandparents' names, hoping against all hope that answers might one day be forthcoming. And it seems that they were. For out of the blue a woman from the Yukon in the Northwestern Territory of Canada got in touch with Linda, saying that they might be half-sisters and that her mother might also be Linda's mother. Weeks later Linda flew to the Yukon Territory to be reunited with her mother again, and was to discover her mother had raised yet another family, and she now had one half-sister and 3 half-brothers. So for a woman who had lost her entire family, she had now acquired a new one. Linda was overjoyed to be reunited with her mother, who was now in her 70s, after so many years of being estranged from each other. It would seem her mother had disappeared from their lives when Linda was 7 years old, and the big question that bothered her the most was why had her mother just vanished off the face of the earth, and clandestinely begun a brand new life in the Yukon. Lucy confessed that Marvin had been abusive towards her, and cheated on her as well as banning her from the home. Was Lucy making up convenient excuses as to why she appeared to have voluntarily walked away from her own children's lives to explain her long absence? Maybe one can never be sure. It could be she felt ashamed for abandoning her children without so much as a bye or leave, as that might make her appear cold and heartless. But on the other hand, maybe she was a frightened woman, desperate to escape the clutches of a man who had made her life insufferable. At first Linda did not believe her mother's excuses, but now she claims she does. But maybe that is because she has sagaciously chosen to put the past behind her, to embrace the future with a brand new slate, where she can make new memories with her mother. Regardless of whether Lucy was telling the truth or not, is of little significance, as the mother and daughter that were once apart have at long last been reunited again. And Lucy is considering spending the rest of her life in the Yukon to be with her mother and her half-brothers and sisters, so she begins a new life. Ostensibly from this story, we can conclude that Lucy deliberately chose to disappear.